But I wanted to ask you about your description of yourself as a feminist. How can a man be a feminist?
Well, there is a question about whether one should say I'm a man who works in a feminist movement or I'm a feminist. And that's a distinction I'm not terribly worried about. But about 35 years ago, I engaged what is commonly known as the radical feminist critique of pornography and prostitution. And it really changed my life. As a young man, I had been a pretty traditional liberal and never gave too much thought to the question of feminism. And when I engaged in the way that these women were critiquing the way men routinely buy and sell women's bodies for sexual pleasure, it really opened up a whole new way of thinking about power and about my own life. And so ever since then, I have very strongly identified with a feminist movement, and a feminist movement that doesn't, just adopt typical left liberal apologies for things like pornography and prostitution, but a truly radical feminist movement. And I think that is consistent with a real left politics. I still consider myself a leftist. And I think the two work together, although not all my comrades on the
But
left agree.
it's quite interesting though, because you take a position, as I understand it, on pornography and prostitution that wouldn't be a million miles away from mine, but mine coming
Mhm.
really from a right-wing perspective as
Right.
a traditional Catholic who worries that pornography is a terrible exploitation of vulnerable women.
Yeah. And I think that, as often is true in politics, two people can come to similar conclusions from different philosophical and ideological perspectives, as we do on this. I think when I started this work, the conservative critique of pornography didn't tend to focus on women and women's concerns. It tended to focus on moral questions. And I think, to the credit of the conservative critique of pornography, and I've worked with many conservatives on this issue, they've understood the feminist critique. And I think that's all to the good. It's a good example of how seemingly disparate movements can learn from each other. In some ways, I suspect I've gotten more conservative as I've gotten older, not in the traditional sense, but I would say conservative as cautious about making overarching statements about the nature of the world as if I understand completely. And I think that's healthy. As people take in new information and deepen their understanding of the crazy nature of the human species, we should, I think, develop more nuanced, a word you used earlier that's very important, uh, nuanced analyses of the complexity of the world. It's not that difficult to understand.